It was one of those rare, carefree evenings. The kind you don't plan for but somehow end up being unforgettable. My wife, Haley, and I had a night off together, something that didn't happen often with our restaurant jobs. We decided to take advantage of it with dinner at a nice spot, followed by a visit to a bar we'd heard about but never actually checked out before. The place was called the Misty Shore, a trendy bar with solid cocktails, great music, and a big dance floor. We had heard good things about it from coworkers and friends, so we figured, why not? Being with Haley always made my nights better. She had a way of making even the most ordinary moments feel special. That night was different, though. She decided to let loose a little more than usual. She was usually the one who limited herself to a drink or two, but that night she had 4. I matched her drink for drink, and for once we both allowed ourselves to relax completely. Haley wasn't a sloppy drunk. She was playful, affectionate, and full of laughter. The way she smiled at me, the way her eyes sparkled under the bar's dim lights, made my heart race. She had always been beautiful, but there was something about that night, something electric between us. We both loved to dance, and like always, guys kept trying to cut in, hoping to steal a dance with her, and just like always, she politely turned them down. She never made a big deal out of it, never used me as an excuse, just smiled and said, "I'm good, thanks." That was one of the things I loved about her. She wasn't the type to play games or seek attention. By the time we were ready to leave, she was fumbling with her jacket, struggling to get her arms into the right sleeves. At one point, she smacked herself in the face with her purse, which sent her into a fit of giggles. She tripped on the sidewalk, practically collapsing into my arms. "You're my husband, right?" She slurred as I helped her into the passenger seat of our car. "Pretty sure?" I chuckled, already wondering if tonight's plans would shift from romance to making sure she didn't throw up in bed. Then, out of nowhere, she giggled again and blurted, "I slept with Tyler Jones." I froze. "What?" I turned toward her, but her head had already lulled to the side. She was out cold. The drive home was silent, except for the low hum of the radio. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. I wanted to wake her up, shake her, demand an explanation, but there was no point. She wouldn't even remember saying it. Once we got home, I helped her undress and tucked her into bed. Normally, I would have taken a moment to appreciate her, to let my eyes linger on her body the way I always did, even after 3 years of marriage. But that night I couldn't. All I could think about was one question. Who was Tyler Jones? I barely got any sleep. Meanwhile, Haley was out cold, completely unaware of the storm she had just started. She didn't wake up until close to noon. By then, I was already on my 4th cup of coffee, this one laced with a generous splash of whiskey because, honestly, why not? Haley stumbled into the kitchen, still in her oversized sleep shirt, her hair a mess. She made herself a cup of coffee before dropping into the chair beside me. I let the silence stretch between us, but I couldn't hold back for long. "Who's Tyler Jones?" I asked, my voice even, careful. Her brow furrowed. "Huh. Last night," I said, watching her face closely. "You told me you slept with him." Her eyes widened in disbelief. I said what? "That's exactly what you said." She blinked at me, then shook her head. "I was drunk," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "You know, drunk people say all kinds of crazy stuff." Yeah, I thought bitterly, but sometimes drunk words are the closest to the truth. We sat there in silence, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She washed our mugs like she always did, something I used to find sweet, but all I could picture was someone else's hands sliding over her skin. For the next few days, things felt off. At work, we barely acknowledged each other. At home, we moved around like strangers, sharing the same space. And for the first time since we started sleeping together, there was no intimacy between us. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe she really had just said something dumb while drunk. But my mind wouldn't let it go. At work, I started noticing little things. How she lingered too long at certain tables, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, flashing smiles that felt too wide. Maybe I was reading too much into it, or maybe I wasn't. Finally, I hit my limit. I need to know where we stand, I said one night after another painfully silent dinner. Either we figure this out or I'm done. Same, she shot back, frustration sharp in her voice. I'm sick of you watching me like I'm guilty of something. Then just tell me the truth, I said. She rolled her eyes. I don't even remember saying it. But you did say it, I pressed. And sometimes drunk people say what they're too scared to admit sober. She let out a breath, rubbing her temples. If it happened before we got married, does it even matter? It matters if it was after, I said. Because if it was, we have a problem. She hesitated, then shrugged. Then I guess we have a problem, because I have no clue why I said it. That was it. We hit a wall. For a solid week, we barely spoke. We still slept in the same bed, but as far apart as possible. No words, no touch, no connection. We even started driving to work separately, something we had never done before. And the worst part? I had actually been planning to surprise her with a car for Christmas. But now everything felt pointless. Then one morning at work, I noticed someone else handling her usual section. Confused, I went to find our manager. Why is Katie covering Haley's tables? I asked. The manager barely glanced up. She called in sick this morning. She never mentioned anything to me. He gave me a pointed look. Maybe you two need to talk. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. By 9:30 that night, I still hadn't heard from her. That's when the manager approached me again. Just so you know, he said, his voice cautious. Haley called to quit. Said she's not coming back. I felt like the ground had just dropped out from under me. Grabbing my coat, I drove straight home. The apartment felt hollow. Some of her clothes were gone. Her toiletries were missing from the bathroom counter. I called her parents. Her dad answered. Have you heard from Haley? I asked. We have, he said. Do you know where she is? She's probably staying with Charlotte, he replied. What's going on? I gave him the short version. Fix it, he said flatly, before it's too late. Then he hung up. I called Charlotte next. No answer. I left a voicemail, asking her to have Haley call me. It felt like she had made her move, leaving me stuck, retracing every moment, trying to figure out if I'd handled it wrong, trying to figure out if I had just lost the love of my life. I peeled the sticker off her shirt and held it between my fingers. I missed you, I admitted, my voice low, barely above a whisper. Haley's eyes softened, glistening under the dim lights. I missed you too, she said, stepping closer. But you really hurt me, Andy. I swallowed hard. I know. Silence stretched between us, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down. Come home, I finally said, reaching for her hand. She hesitated. I want to, but I need to know something first. I nodded, knowing exactly what she was about to ask. Did you? She faltered, then took a deep breath and tried again. Did you sleep with anyone while we were apart? I exhaled slowly. No. Relief flickered across her face. And you? I asked, bracing myself. No, she said without hesitation. I swear, Andy, I never cheated on you. Not before, not now. I would never. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to so badly. Then why did you say it? I asked, my voice barely steady. She looked away, shame creeping into her expression. I was drunk, Andy. I read that stupid sticker and the words just came out. She met my eyes again. But you didn't believe me. You were so quick to assume the worst. I know, I admitted, guilt settling deep in my chest. I couldn't shake the doubt. It ate at me, Haley. She nodded slowly. I get it. But instead of talking to me, you investigated me like I was some kind of suspect. You stalked my friends, my family. You even hunted down some random guy just because of his name. I flinched. When she put it like that, I sounded like a lunatic. I was desperate, I admitted. I thought I was losing you. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Andy, I left because I needed space. You didn't trust me, and that hurt worse than anything. I looked down at the sticker still in my hand. And now? I asked, forcing myself to meet her eyes. Do you still love me? Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer right away. The hesitation sent a jolt of fear through me. "Come home with me," I said again, more desperate this time. She bit her lip, considering. "Not yet," she finally said. Pain stabbed through my chest, but I nodded. "Okay." She squeezed my hand gently. "But I'll think about it." The next few days dragged by in a haze of uncertainty. Haley wasn't avoiding me, but she wasn't rushing back into my arms either. She took things slow, making sure we really talked. Not just about the incident, but about everything we'd ignored before. I realized how often I had taken our relationship for granted, assuming everything was fine just because we didn't fight. But Haley had been lonely. She'd needed more from me, and I hadn't even noticed. One night, we sat in my car outside her apartment, talking until nearly sunrise. I told her everything. How lost I felt without her. How I'd driven myself crazy with doubts. How I'd even considered packing up and leaving town just to escape the pain. She cried, gripping my hand like she never wanted to let go. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered. "You won't," she said, voice thick with emotion. "But I need time, Andy. Just a little more time." I swallowed hard, but nodded. "I'll wait." A week passed, then another. Haley and I kept talking, kept spending time together. Slowly, things felt less like a painful interrogation and more like us again. One Friday night, I found myself back at the bar where it all started. I wasn't drinking much, just keeping an eye on things. That's when I saw him, Tyler Jones. He was at the far end of the room, chatting up some woman who looked like she was only half listening. His body language was the same, leaning in close, flashing that easy grin, oozing confidence. I watched as she hesitated, considering whatever offer he was making. Then, to my surprise, she smiled and let him lead her toward the exit. I clenched my fists. I had spent so much time obsessing over this guy, convinced he was my enemy. But now, as I watched him leave with yet another woman, I realized something. He didn't matter. Even if Haley had cheated, which she hadn't, it wouldn't have been because of him. It would have been because something between us had been broken, because I had failed her in ways I hadn't even realized. But we were fixing it now, and that was all that mattered. 2 nights later, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Haley was standing there, looking nervous. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." She took a deep breath. "I'm ready to come home." Relief flooded through me. She stepped forward into my arms, into my life again. And this time, I wouldn't let her slip away. The past few months hadn't been easy. Rebuilding trust never is. But we did it piece by piece, night by night. And now, as we stood together, stronger than before, I knew one thing for sure. Love is messy, it's painful, it's confusing. But when it's real, it's worth fighting for. The first few weeks after Haley moved back in, we were careful, like walking on ice we weren't sure would hold. We tiptoed around certain topics, avoided old wounds that hadn't fully healed. But we were trying. She started leaving little notes for me again on the fridge, in my jacket pocket, on my nightstand. "Have a good day. Love you. Don't forget your coffee." Small things, but they mattered. I caught myself watching her sometimes, memorizing the way she curled up on the couch with a book, the way she hummed absent-mindedly while cooking. Felt like I was falling in love with her all over again. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe we might actually make it. One night, I woke up and found the bed empty. Panic flared in my chest for a split second before I heard soft voices from the living room. I slipped out quietly, following the sound. Haley sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her phone to her ear. "No, Mom. I'm okay," she was saying, voice low. "I just couldn't sleep." Pause, then a sigh. Yeah, I do love him. I never stopped." Something in me tightened. I stayed out of sight, listening. "But I'm scared," she admitted. "What if he stops trusting me again? What if he gets paranoid, starts questioning everything?" Another pause. "I don't want to go through that again." Guilt churned in my stomach. I had done that to her. Her mother must have said something reassuring, because Haley let out a soft laugh. "Yeah, you're right. If I didn't believe in us, I wouldn't be here." She hung up a moment later, sighing as she rubbed her temples. I stepped forward. You believe in us? She startled, turning to look at me. Andy? I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I said quickly, sitting beside her. I hesitated. I needed to hear that. Her eyes softened. I do believe in us, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. No more doubting me. No more assuming the worst. I nodded, reaching for her hand. No more. She searched my face for a long moment. Then, finally, she leaned in, resting her head against my shoulder. I held her close, breathing her in. We were going to be okay. Time passed. Days turned into weeks, then months. There were moments of doubt, moments where old wounds threatened to resurface, but we faced them together. This time, I started therapy, not just for our relationship, but for myself. I needed to understand why my mind had gone to such dark places, why I had been so afraid of losing her that I'd nearly destroyed everything. Haley noticed the change in me. She told me she felt safer, more secure, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like the man she deserved. One evening, we found ourselves back at the bar where it all started. Haley glanced around, shaking her head. Feels different now. Yeah, I smirked. No stickers this time. She laughed. I think we've had enough of those. We sat at our usual spot, comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes with knowing someone completely. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, Tyler Jones. He was alone this time, nursing a drink at the far end of the bar. He looked tired. Not the cocky player I had once imagined, just another guy trying to figure things out. Haley followed my gaze. Still think he was the villain? I shook my head. No, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't jealous because I finally understood. Tyler had never been the real threat. My own fears had been. I turned back to Haley, watching the way she smiled at me, the way she reached for my hand without hesitation. We had made it, and that was all that mattered. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I slid a small box across the breakfast table. Haley blinked at it, then at me. Andy. I took a deep breath. I know we've been through a lot, and I know I messed up, but I love you, Haley, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that. She opened the box slowly, eyes filling with tears when she saw the ring inside. I reached for her hand. Will you marry me? For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then, finally, she let out a shaky laugh. You're an idiot, I grinned. So that's a yes? She bit her lip, pretending to think. Then she launched herself at me, kissing me hard. Yes, she whispered against my lips. 1,000 times, yes. Love is messy, it's painful, it's confusing. But when it's real, it's worth fighting for. And this time, I wasn't letting go.